Hey everyone, this is Blake McDonald with the Department of Historic Resources. I've just started the meeting and we're going to wait for another 7, 8 minutes to get started. Thank you. Hey Lena, could you confirm for me that you see a full screen version of the PowerPoint?
Um, yes. Well, I see arrows and 1 of 13 at the bottom of the screen. Is that what you mean?
I'm on a presenter mode and I just want to make sure that you get as much of the screen as possible so I can change the format if it looks too small.
Okay. I can see it. It looks fine. It looks fine to me.
Great, thank you. Hi all, we're going to get started in a few minutes, but before we do, and even after we start, you're welcome to put your name and any organization you might be representing into the chat if you want to do so. Thank you. We still have folks filtering in, so I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started. Thanks for your patience. Okay, folks, we are holding steady at about 20 participants, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we do, I want to make sure that everyone knows that this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be posted to DHR's webpage for this project. So thank you all so much for attending this public information session this evening. My name is Blake McDonald, and I'm a grant specialist at the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. I am joined by Lena McDonald, no relation, although we have worked together for quite some time, with Commonwealth Preservation Group, who will be sharing this evening as well. For those who are just joining, if you want to put your name, introduce yourself, put whatever organization you might be with into the chat, you're welcome to do so. Throughout the evening tonight, you're also welcome to use the chat to ask questions or make comments. We'll also, at the end of our very brief presentation, make lots of room for folks to ask questions as well. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about this project, what it is and how it came to be. I'm then going to pass over to Lena McDonald, our contractor with Commonwealth Preservation Group, to talk a little bit about their role in the project. So thank you again for being here this evening, and let's dive right in. So we're here tonight to talk about a project that we're excited and honored to be able to run at the Department of Historic Resources, which is a multiple property document for African American schools in Virginia and an individual National Register nomination for the Cuckoo School. So a bit of framing out, who are we and why are we here? I mentioned that I'm with the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. We are the State Historic Preservation Office. We have 3 branches. Our biggest branch, the one that I'm located in, is in Richmond, in the capital. Every state and territory has a state preservation office. Ours has been around since the mid 1960s. And you can see our mission on the screen here. It is quite a broad mission to foster, encourage, and support Virginia's significant historic architecture, archaeology, and cultural resources. Some of our programs that you might be more familiar with include the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places, which we administer here in the state of Virginia. We have our very robust rehabilitation tax credit programs. We have both state tax credits and federal tax credits. Properties that are listed on the Landmarks Register or the National Register can be eligible for those opt-in credits. And then we have, as I'm sure you've seen all over Virginia's highways and roads, our historical highway marker program. We have the oldest highway marker program in the nation, and we are continuing to add dozens of new highway markers every year. Tonight, we're going to be focusing in on a component of the Virginia Landmarks Register and National Register of Historic Places portion of what we do at the Department of Historic Resources. So a little bit of background information about the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places. Technically, they are two different lists, although they function very similarly. We use the same paperwork for them. The Virginia Landmarks Register was created in 1965. It is the state of Virginia's official list of places that are significant historic architecture, archaeology, or have other cultural significance. That could be local, that could be regional, that could even be national significance. And then the National Register of Historic Places was created by the federal government in 1966. And that's pretty much the same thing, just on a countrywide scale. So structures, sites, objects, and districts, as well as buildings that represent our history and cultural foundations. And it is important to point out that it is not just buildings that we're looking at. Bridges and cemeteries, battlefields here in Virginia. I've put up on the screen just a selection of some of the places added to the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places this past quarter at our last quarterly board meeting. And you can see we've got everything from a great big battlefield to a commercial historic district in Southwest Virginia in the town of Bluefield, an old manufacturing plant in Lynchburg, and then the beautiful Zion Union Baptist Church out in Gloucester. So a wide range of our history can be represented on the Virginia Landmarks Register and National Register of Historic Places. And there are a few tools that we use to help list things on those registers. And one of those tools is what we call a multiple property document. And that's what we're going to be discussing with the African American Schools Project tonight. A multiple property document is a form that the National Park Service provides to us, and they're kind of like our partners at the federal level. And it enables us to provide historic context and background for buildings, objects, structures, sites, and districts that have shared history, shared themes, trends, and patterns. The document outlines how those things can be listed on the National Register, whatever types of resources fall under that categorical umbrella. And by giving all of this background history and identifying the types of resources that are within that category, it actually streamlines the process of listing those things on the National Register. It kind of does a lot of the work that's required for a National Register nomination, which can be a 20 or 30 page document, depending on the complexity of what you're putting on the National Register. Because it's a great big historical context in that one multiple property document, it can also be used for all sorts of other preservation planning purposes. So you can mine it for information that might assist with a historical highway marker application. Everything that we put on the National Register and the Virginia Landmarks Register is copyright free. It's public use. So you could take parts of it for interpretive materials, signage, or a pamphlet for a tour or a website. And we use them as preservation planners, figuring out, where are the important things in any given community. So I think one of the examples of a multiple property document that for me makes it easiest to understand is our Diners of Virginia multiple property document. This is one of our older ones. We've had it since 1995. You can see it up on the screen here, a little snippet of our listing page for it. If you've ever seen a diner, I'm sure you can agree that they have kind of shared characteristics. Oftentimes they look alike. A lot of them date from the 1930s to the 1960s. We don't see a lot of diners after that. They might have shiny chrome or big signs. So all of these shared characteristics and this shared history makes diners a great topic for a multiple property document. And so we have one in Virginia that has assisted with the listing of probably about half a dozen diners all across the state by providing that kind of pre-made historic context to support individual nominations. And just to clarify, the multiple property document itself doesn't automatically list anything on the National Register, Virginia Landmarks Register. It just provides sort of the foundational research to make that easier. And over the last 20 years, we have used multiple property documents in Virginia to enable the efficient listing of a lot of African American historic resources. So we have way back in 2004, a multiple property document for Rosenwald schools. Schools that were funded by the Julius Rosenwald Fund. I'm sure many of us are familiar with them. And I will thank you very much for that question. I will make that contrast in just a little bit. Thank you. And you can see an example of Rosenwald School down in the bottom right. The same year, we had an African American Historic Resources of Alexandria multiple property document, and a couple of others after that that were locality specific, where we looked at the shared history of African American experience in localities like Petersburg or Fauquier County, and what the historic resources there could tell us about that history. In 2023, Commonwealth Preservation Group, who's the same one working on this project, generated the African American Watermen of Virginia multiple property document, where we looked at historic resources all through the Chesapeake Bay region, the Eastern Shore, the Northern Neck, down into Tidewater, that focused on the African American experience, the Waterman experience over the last 200 years or so. And then we have in draft form right now a multiple property document that focuses on places associated with the Green Book in Virginia. The travel guides, very popular with African American travelers in the mid 20th century. So looking at all the places in Virginia that were listed on the Green Book, identifying those that remain standing, providing a historic context that's sort of shared amongst many of those types of resources, things like tourist homes, as you can see in the bottom left, gas stations, motels, in order to make it easier to list those places by kind of pre-writing much of that shared history. And so that brings us to this project, the African American Schools Multiple Property Document. So this project is funded by a grant from the National Park Service called an Underrepresented Communities Grant that the Department of Historic Resources received. And then we used the money from that grant, $75,000, to hire Commonwealth Preservation Group to complete the project. That project will be a multiple property document that looks at African American schools that are not part of the Julius Rosenwald Building Fund, because we already have a multiple property document for the Julius Rosenwald Fund schools. We've listed well over 24 of them at this point, but we know that there are a lot of other African American schools in Virginia. There are over 200 of them that we have surveyed, and those date from before the Rosenwald School period, and they date from after the Rosenwald School period. So this project is to develop that historic context for all the other African American schools that fall outside of that category. So we're looking at a much wider date range. The Rosenwald schools were, and I'm sure somebody on this call will be able to tell me exactly the dates, but I believe about 1950 to about 1940 or a little after, but please correct me in the chat. We're looking at about 1870, end of the Civil War, all the way up until desegregation in 1965, a little bit after. Those are approximate dates right now. And we're looking at what we've identified as 3 eras of schools. And I have images of each of those eras on the screen here. Initially, smaller, often rural 1 or 2 room schools like the Cuckoo School in Louisa County. Moving to New Deal era, 1930s, 40s consolidation schools like the Carver School, in Salem, Virginia, in the postcard there in the middle. And then equalization era schools from much later in that period. An excellent example near Richmond being the Barrett's Colored School in Charles City County. So we're going to provide, oh, thank you very much, Jody, 1970 to 1932 for Rosenwald schools in Virginia. So we are going to provide that background, that historic context for each of these eras of African American schools in Virginia, and then to show how the information in the multiple property document can streamline or make easier an individual National Register nomination for an African American school. We will also be generating an individual nomination for the Cuckoo School in Louisa County. Up in the upper left, that smaller 2-room rural school dating to that Reconstruction era period. All right. So in addition to listing the Cuckoo School in the National Register and having this great big context documents that can assist with the listing of other African American schools that are not Rosenwald schools, some of the project benefits here include that the multiple property document can be used by anyone. It can be accessed by the public. It can assist researchers. I mentioned that preservation planners and other professionals use these documents to figure out, what's important about each of these eras of African American schools. It'll have a great big bibliography in it to help people find other sources related to this topic. I've mentioned several times now the streamlining of individual National Register nominations. I mentioned once before that historical highway marker applications can draw information from this multiple property document. And it's important to point out that no restrictions arise as a result of this process. No one's going to be told what to do. No rules are going to be made for African American schools or any other type of resource. This is purely informational, and it's intended to help folks who want to list their African American schools on the National Register of Historic Places. So what's going to happen next? We are early in the project stages. We wanted to get out and share this work with all of you before we start. So right now we're working on public engagement. We're working on research. In early 2025, Commonwealth Preservation Group will be presenting the Department of Historic Resources with a draft of the multiple property document and of the individual National Register nomination for the Cuckoo School. We are going to post these draft materials on our project webpage with a period for public comment. So all of you who are here tonight, anyone who you tell about this project, we'd encourage you, and we'll post it all over our social media and put out information on our webpage as well of when it's available. And we'd encourage you to come and take a look at it in that draft form and let us know what you think. Several months later, we're going to be working towards the final multiple property document and Cuckoo School nomination. And we will end this project with another virtual public information session to share the findings of the research that's been done and to talk about, once again, how this product can be used by those who are interested in the topic. The webpage that hopefully many of you access to register for this webinar will be updated as this project progresses. We'll certainly be putting the draft documents up there, but any other fun updates that we can make in the meantime will be added there as well. So I've spoken plenty. I'm going to hand things over to Lena McDonald at Commonwealth Preservation Group to give you a little bit of information about her firm and how they'll be doing this work. Lena, take it away.
Thank you, Blake. Before I do that, do you want to respond to the question about MPDs and VCRIS?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So someone asked a great question about how multiple property documents vary from VCRIS. So thank you for asking that. VCRIS is what we call our statewide cultural resource database. The long, boring name is the Virginia Cultural Resource Information System. And it is the catalog of everything that we have looked at, all the architecture, all of the archaeology, those objects, structures, sites. Some of those are listed on the National Register. Some of those are not yet listed on the National Register. It's a much wider bucket of things that have been surveyed for any number of reasons or projects. So the multiple property document will help to elevate African-American schools that maybe we've already surveyed, maybe are already in our VCRIS system and haven't yet been listed on the National Register. It'll help to take them to that next step. So if you think about it as kind of a workflow process, first something gets surveyed and put into VCRIS. And then if the property owner wants to pursue National Register listing, they will start that process. And that's kind of the next step. And so this MPD for African American schools will help make that next step towards National Register listing a little bit easier. I hope that answers your question, but please pop on the chat if you need clarification.
Thanks, Blake. Just quickly about Commonwealth Preservation Group. This is a small business established in 2004 and still going strong. Our main office is located in Norfolk, but I happen to be in Central Virginia. We do statewide projects such as the Green Book project that Blake mentioned earlier, and pretty much anything else that might come along, we might at least take a stab at it. When it comes to our mission, we are seeking not just to preserve places or buildings or structures, but also to return them to active use in the community, and also to preserve the cultural heritage that makes those places important to communities. If you don't know the stories behind places, you don't necessarily understand why it's important to invest in keeping it around. And so we do our best to have strong relationships with our clients and to facilitate relationships with other entities who are involved in historic preservation, whether that's local or state or federal government or nonprofit organizations, the owners of historic places, and then just interested community groups. So can you advance the slide, please, Blake? I wanted to explain to you guys the information collection process that we are conducting right now. So you can read the bullet points on the screen, and they sort of summarize what we're up to. And I'll give you just a quick summary of the purpose of each of those. So for instance, the reason we're reviewing the information that DHR already has on hand is that we think it will help us to identify statewide trends in the construction of schools across Virginia. We think it'll give us a better understanding of the kinds of schools that were built and when, how long they remained in use, and what types of student populations that they served. The reason we're doing research at libraries and online is so that we can access things like the annual reports of the State Superintendent of Education, which go all the way back to 1870. We want to use case studies of localities, whether it's a town or a county or a city. And we're fortunate that there are many of those. I've identified well over a dozen at this point, detailed examinations of different parts of various localities across the Commonwealth in different periods of their public school systems. The bibliography will be important because that gives you a guide to looking for information yourself for your particular needs. Wherever possible, we include the links to online information so that that's easier to find. I do find that bibliographies are much more helpful to people if a lot of it is online material, because you could get that from any computer. You don't have to travel to Richmond to go to the Library of Virginia, and you don't have to travel to anywhere other than your desk to find a lot of really good and useful material. And the reason that we're going to be synthesizing the research findings is that we can't include every detail about Virginia's segregated public education system from 1870 to 1965. What we want to do instead is present the findings in a way that's accessible so that readers don't have to have specialized expertise to understand. So for instance, you will not see statistical analysis in this context. Instead, you will be presented with just examples of, in this particular locality at this particular time, this is what was happening. The final MPD is going to be, we hope, useful for preparing nominations, because essentially what you have in the multiple property document, that presents for you the overall context for why African American schools are a resource type worthy of preservation. And you guys on this call probably already know lots of reasons that these schools are worthy of preservation. But in terms of the government program that is the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register, the MPD is the document that puts all of that in one place and connects the historic places, the themes, people, events, and periods of time. And that ideally saves you from having to do that legwork, so that you will be focusing instead, if you want to nominate a place, you'll focus on its specific history instead of having to worry about, well, what was happening, up in Richmond while this was going on. The other thing that MPDs are very helpful for is helping with developing tours, pamphlets, exhibits, if you want to help your larger community to understand the history of the place you're preserving. And also, I think it can, by knowing how communities use these schools in the past, I think it can inform ideas for ways to use them now and in the future. I think the modern, in modern life, schools are not necessarily the center of community life the way that they used to be, but that doesn't mean that these historic schools can't return to that role. Next slide, please, Blake. And we are asking for help from the public. We have specific questions about what we're trying to get to. A lot of it is stuff that's still in living memory, even though people, when they hear desegregation, they think, oh, that was so long ago. And it was, but it wasn't that long ago. So for instance, we are hoping to hear from people about their experiences during segregation and then during the desegregation process. If you have ideas for newspaper articles or oral history projects that are at a local library, if you know of a good book or a journal, that can be helpful. Sorry, I thought my electricity had gone out, but it's just my surge protector. Very sorry about that. Anyway, books and articles that are specific to either a particular place or a particular school, those can be hard to find, but we are hoping to get some of those. Another item that we're hoping to learn about is people who participated in equalization lawsuits. So by equalization, that meant that was the period when a lot of governments were trying to demonstrate that a separate, segregated school system could be equal for everyone by providing identical schools for African American students, for
Did Lena freeze up for everyone or just for me? Okay, I see
She's
some
frozen
nodding.
for me too, Blake.
Okay. Lena may be having some technical difficulties.
We just lost her.
Okay. We also have Marcus Pollard here from CPG. Marcus, do you want to fill anything in before we move to the Q&A session? If you're able to unmute yourself, you're welcome to. Let me see if I can do it for you. Okay. Well, we're going to. Oh, there we go. I can hear you now. Yeah. Feel free to say anything else you'd like. This is Marcus Pollard, one of the principals of Commonwealth Preservation Group, also on the project team. Thanks, Marcus.
You bet. Sorry about that. So I think the key is we really enjoy oral history. It's the Commonwealth Preservation Group. And what makes these kind of documents more than just an exercise in academia is the human factor. So particularly if you guys know a local document or a local person with knowledge of these periods or these kind of schools, that really would help us round out a better report at the end of this process. And I think that's where Lena was going with this, is that it really having individual testaments to these events is much more valuable than just a book or an analysis. And I think that was that.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcus. Okay. Well, we really appreciate you listening to our presentation. You are always welcome to reach out to me, Blake McDonald, at the Department of Historic Resources with any questions about this project. Lena, who you just heard from, is the best person to contact if you do want to share some information, but Lena can also answer all the same questions I can about how this project came to be and what Commonwealth Preservation Group is going to be doing. I believe that Lena's email is linked directly on the DHR webpage for this project, which I'll pop in the chat in just a moment. But now we would really love to hear from anyone who's in attendance. If you have thoughts or questions, you are welcome to raise your hand and I will try to call on you. And we'll hope that we don't have any technical difficulties, but you might have to bear with me. Oh, and we do have, before we jump into that, there's one question in the chat that I want to catch. Concerning schools that do not exist anymore. That is an excellent question, whether those are going to be covered within the multiple property document. And then I'm going to take that to the next level as to whether they're eligible for the National Register and the Virginia Landmarks Register. So certainly the historic context within the multiple property document will talk about schools that are still standing and schools and other resources that are no longer on the landscape to paint that full picture of each of those eras of African American schools and what we know and what we're learning about them. The National Register and the Virginia Landmarks Register do require that something is still there. Sometimes that can be archaeology if you have a well-preserved archaeology site. But oftentimes it does need to be a standing building to be eligible for the National Register and the Virginia Landmarks Register. That doesn't mean, however, that you won't be able to use the multiple property document at all, because it can still be used in the case of the Pearson Colored School for the development, perhaps of interpretive materials. The historical highway marker program, our silver and black signs, those do not require that the topic of the highway marker is still on the landscape. So if you do not already have a historical highway marker, you could certainly look into that application process and use information from the multiple property document to assist in developing that application. So just because your school or the place that you're interested in associated with African American schools is not there anymore, it might mean that it couldn't go on the National Register, the Virginia Landmark Register, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other ways that you could use the information in the multiple property document. So thank you. That's a really good question. And then we got one more question that just came in. Is the goal of the project that there would be an MPD completed for each segregated school? So not quite. So the multiple property document is kind of like the umbrella document that describes all sorts of African American schools from 1870 to about 1965 in order to support the National Register nominations for individual schools that fall within that period. So our hope would be that somebody will use this much broader history of all these different schools over this almost 100-year period to help list the individual school in their community on the National Register of Historic Places. So certainly we hope that this project results in National Register listings for many individual African American schools. And thank you so much. Somebody just commented that they have information and pictures of some of our, what we're calling kind of our first era of Reconstruction era schools. If you're willing to talk more about that and share them with the project team, I know Lena would love to hear from you. Great. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, but if folks would like to raise their hand with any questions, you're welcome to do so. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Corazon, if you have a question, it looks like your hand might be raised. You're welcome to unmute and speak.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I'm working with an African-American family, the Kofor Pearsons, and we were trying to get a marker for the oldest church, 1891, Little Zion Baptist Church, the cemetery, and the Pearson Colored School in our Burke, Virginia hometown. I sent the note to Jennifer Liu about getting a marker for all three. Now, this project, would it be better for me to separate all the information I have about the Pearson Colored School? Because I do have pictures of the school. I do have oral history interviews with the seniors who attended the school, and the history. I sent it all to Lena. So would it be a good idea to just separate the school and have it presented to this MPD while at the same time submitting to Jennifer a marker for all three, the church, the cemetery, and the school?
That is a great question. It sounds like a really neat area. I look forward to learning more about it. Do I understand correctly from your comment in the chat that the school is no longer there?
Yes, the school was sold and now it's part of a development. However, the church is still there and the cemetery is still there. And by the way, it's a very interesting history because the founder of the church and also the school was a brother-in-law of oh God, here I am, I'm blanking out, but the Manassas School, Industrial School for Colored Youth, the founder, and here I'm blanking out, but they have a great history, and it's a great history for our hometown in Burke, Virginia. So as I said, I sent the information to Lena, and I was thinking it might be of value to make sure we include the school itself, because the school was a focus of the activism of the African American community in Burke. They met there and they discussed a lot of issues about raising the salaries of teachers, etc. So the school itself has a history that is quite important for our community of Burke.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this is a statewide project. And as I mentioned, places that are no longer on the landscape can still be an important part of the history of African American schools in Virginia. So certainly within the context of the multiple property document, there will be discussion of some of those important places that for whatever reason do not exist anymore. When it comes to your question about historical highway markers, that's going to be one that I would punt over to Jen Liu, our historical highway marker program manager, as to whether she thinks it would be better to look at that group of resources versus just that very important school. I could kind of see that going either way. But there might be an opportunity here to look at both the historical highway marker for the school or the complex, as well as a National Register nomination for the still standing church and cemetery, if it still kind of looks like it did in the historic period. So you might have a couple of different avenues here, but when it comes to the potential content for the highway marker, I would certainly send that on to Lena. Marcus, did you want to add something in?
No, I just want to thank you. And by the way, I was thinking of Jenny Dean, who really played a major role in education of African American youth in our Burke, Virginia hometown.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Hey there, Blake. Jen Lukes is not on, who manages our marker program, is not on today, I don't think, but I would like to just speak to that. I would say to Ms. Corazon, when you apply for a historic marker, submit all the information about all the properties that you know about. That complex is an important feature with all the pieces and parts, the school, the church. So the more information you can provide to the marker staff to evaluate the historic significance, the better. So please continue to provide as much information as you apply for that marker.
Thank you very much.
Marcus, did you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, just a quick comment. There's a long tradition, which Amanda knows about from a project we've worked on, of the African American school being linked to the church and the cemetery as sort of a unified group. And I think in this case, it might be better to try to either for the marker or a nomination under that context rather than the MPD, which is really focused on school construction solely for schools. There's a nomination which is up at the Park Service, which we just finished for the Pleasant Ridge School in Virginia Beach, and it has an historic school, an historic African American church, and a historic African American cemetery all together on one site. And that tradition is long-standing in the community and is itself pretty significant. So that's just a thought.
Thank you, Marcus. One item came through in the chat. We've got someone wondering if there are any recommendations for tracking down school board records that aren't at the Library of Virginia. That is not a question that I can answer, but I would put it to the group if folks want to put an answer in the chat or say something out loud. Marcus, do you want to jump in?
Well, I see Jody has his hand up, and he also can speak to getting local school records because he got it for the Cuckoo School. So maybe see what he's got.
Jody, take it away.
And in fact, my suggestion impacts or has something to do with that question. I wanted to make a suggestion that my camera's, oh, there it goes. Wanted to make a suggestion that I have found that the best source of information for the schools often is with the school board minutes for that particular county that the school's located in. And school board minutes are very, very irregular, whether or not they exist in the county, how many of the records still exist. It's very uneven. I'm not suggesting that that CPG document what counties have school board records minutes for all 100 counties in Virginia. But as they do their research, if they've discovered that there are certain counties that still have their school board minutes, I would ask that that be included in the bibliography so we have that information, and future research can take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. That's really helpful. Any other thoughts or questions? I want to remind folks that we are at the beginning of the project period, so there is going to be plenty of time to provide input. Samia, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, but please go ahead.
You got it right. You got it perfect. Hi, how are y'all doing? My name is Samia. I'm sorry, I just got out of another meeting, so I got here fairly late. I'm found this link on LinkedIn. I am a photo restoration artist, so my passion is taking pictures that are damaged, that need some TLC from like water damage or tears, and I bring them back to life. And so when I saw this meeting that was happening, I was just interested in how, because I'm trying to find ways to connect to organizations like the one that you all have. And I'm just curious if there are any opportunities in this project where something like that could be helpful. And if so, who would I get in contact with to talk about that?
Thank you. That is a really needed skill set. We always are looking for folks who can help restore photos and documents and objects. So I know that we do a little bit of that work at the Department of Historic Resources, but I'm wondering if other folks on the call have ideas for how Samia might plug in here, or other organizations that could be a good connection. And you're welcome to put, if you have a website or a contact or anything, into the meeting chat as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'll be emailing you all as well.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Corzine, please go ahead.
The church, the school, and the cemetery that I was talking about was included in a Fairfax County inventory of historic sites. So does that make my job easier in terms of deciding between the MDP and the historical marker? That's one. And two, I actually documented all the school board meetings that were published online by Fairfax County in relation to the school. So there might be enough there to make sure that the records for the school is included in the MDP. But, you know, this meeting is very good because it's making me think as to what is the best way to preserve and to share the history.
Well, we always love to hear that we're making people think. That's definitely one of the goals. So I'm glad.
You are.
So I think that if you're listed on the local register, that certainly may help you as you potentially look to obtain eligibility for the Virginia Landmarks Register and National Register of Historic Places. It sounds like the historic resources that you're working on have already been recognized as locally significant. Amanda, do you have any additional thoughts on how that might translate into potential nominations for the National Register or the Highway Marker programs? I'll say another way that it helps you is that there's probably already some research that's been done on the topic in addition to the research you've done. So maybe a little bit of that work's been accomplished.
You know, honestly, I was getting texts from Lena about her connectivity, so I tuned out for about 30 seconds. Can you summarize the question? I'm sorry.
Certainly. So the resources up in Burke have been listed on the local registers, and how that may assist with projects that we could be involved with the highway marker or potential state and national register listing.
Well, it's very convenient that they've already been surveyed, because if the community or the locality wanted to proceed with National Register listing, having a survey already shows us what is there. It has done a lot of the work for us. And so it'll make your job a lot easier in presenting the photos and the history that we need to assess whether there's a district or not. And it's less important for the marker program, because the marker program is more about history and less about the existing place. So that's what I always tell folks, is that when you think about the registers, we still need a place that exists to display that history. Whereas in the marker situation, you don't need a place. There's a lot of places that have been torn down, but the history is still important. So that's sort of the difference in the way that you can think about how to approach these two separate programs from our office.
So basically go back to Jennifer Looks and work on the markers, what you're saying.
I would say, please consult our website and find the marker application. We review them quarterly, and it is a competitive scoring process because everybody wants a marker. It's a very popular program. We can only do 5 per quarter. So consult the website, talk with Jen Lukes. She's a great resource. Apply. If you don't make it one quarter, apply again. You might get it the second time, because she provides really good feedback on how to really get the essence of the history that we need to put in those 700 characters.
Oh, I just wanted to say Jennifer has been wonderful. I've worked on 2 markers with her already that are up. But
well, she's great. Yeah.
Oh, she's wonderful. Excellent. She really does. She's really very helpful. I guess my point is really, I'd like to see if there's a way I could honor the Pearson Colored School also, because it might be lost if you just have a historical marker for the church, the cemetery, and the school. And that's why I was so intrigued by the MPD.
The MPD could help with getting you the historic information you need to have the school also mentioned on the marker, because providing all that history is important for us to understand the significance of the whole complex, the church, the cemetery, and the school. So all is not lost, but I still think the marker is probably the way to go in recognizing the school.
Okay, well, thank you. I was talking to Jennifer and I told her I was holding back because we're having a big controversy. Somebody wants to change the name of Burke. It's another one of those renaming issue.
Oh,
Jennifer knows about it. So I told her I'm going to hold off and see how this is resolved. But as I said, I just like the idea that you're doing for the school, because the school itself has got quite a lot of history and impact on the Black community of our Burke, Virginia hometown. And certainly the family that contributed the land, the work, the money, etc., for the school, the church, and the cemetery, well, their descendants are very interested in having that recognized.
It certainly sounds like there's room to discuss the school within the context of the MPD. It sounds like a very important place. We have a couple folks who've been waiting patiently. Marianne, I see that you've got both a question in the chat and your hand up. So if you'd like to take the floor, please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was having problems with my microphone. The question disappeared off the chat, so I wasn't sure if it was there. And I came in late, so I'm not sure. So I initiated a project to preserve the history of Union High School in Caroline County, Virginia, and I self-published a book on the school. So I have a lot of information that I want to contribute. But I also wanted to know, is there a way to find out, like on this call, what schools are represented or people here representing, or are you all tracking that? How can we find out? So people, if multiple people are interested in the same school, they can work together.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. If you scroll up in the chat, several folks did introduce themselves and say what organization they were with, or if they were representing a specific school. Anyone who maybe came in late or didn't have a chance to do that and wants to now, please do so. And it sounds like particularly if there's anyone who's working in or around or about Caroline County, it would be great to make that connection here as well. So thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out.
I think I'm have a. I can't scroll in my. I can't scroll my
Well, how about
screen.
this? I can provide you with a copy of the chat after this,
That'll be great.
as
Thank you.
well as a copy of the video. And then anyone who's on the call and can access the chat now and wants to connect, please feel free to chime in. Lucille Smith, it looks like you've got your hand up. You've been waiting for a bit. Please take it away.
Please
Okay.
unmute Miss Lucille. There you go. Thank you.
Yes.
There we go.
I am currently documenting in a book the 7 Rosenwald schools of Albemarle County. Of course, that FISC database has been down. They've been working on it for the last year. And I do have pictures of 6 of the Rosenwald schools of Albemarle County and lots of information about these schools. But I wanted to include that last one because 6 of those schools are still standing. 1 has been placed on the historical registry. 3 have been made into private dwellings, and several of them, they're in wonderful shape. And it's really interesting. I would love to know more about the Rosenwald schools because I know that for the state of Virginia, there were 382 of them, and they list them by county. And I know that Albemarle County had 7 of those schools, and I would love to have a complete documentation of those 7 schools of Albemarle County, just missing that one school that I can't find a picture of. I have information on it, but no picture of that school. So what have you done to try to locate in an advertisement or something pictures of these schools?
Thank you. That is a
Anyone?
great question. Rosenwald schools remain a very, very important component of African American history in Virginia. And just because this project is looking beyond Rosenwald schools, it doesn't mean that we're not still extremely interested in that portion of our history. So we do have a multiple property document, just like the one we're putting together for this project, specific to Rosenwald schools. That was written back in 2004, and I dropped that into the meeting chat as a link to take you to that document. That has a partial list. Well, you know what? It has a full list of all the Rosenwald schools that were built in Virginia, but back in 2004, that list was not field checked to find out, you know, which schools are still standing and which aren't. Just a couple years ago, Preservation Virginia, kind of our partner organization that does more advocacy work, they were able to fund a survey of all the remaining Rosenwald schools in Virginia. So I'm going to see if I can find a link to that project page and put that in the chat as well. But they actually went through and determined where all of the still standing Rosenwalds were and where they weren't. There's some great info on Rosenwalds that are not there anymore. And they gave all that information to us. Oh, thank you, Austin, for putting that into the chat, a link to that project. They gave all the information to us as well. So if you have questions about a specific Rosenwald school standing or not standing, and you're not able to find it within the project page for Preservation Virginia that was just put into the chat, please reach out to me and I can look and see what we have in our database.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops, sorry, checking the chat, and thanks for folks who are continuing to point out some great resources. I will make this presentation available both as a link to all of you attendees, and we'll be posting it on our project webpage as well. And someone who is not actively speaking, would you mind putting the project webpage link into the chat as well? I will in just a minute, if not. other thoughts or questions from the group? You've had some really great comments. I so appreciate the time you've taken tonight. This is the start of the project, so we really want you to stay in touch, to reach out, to share resources with the Commonwealth Preservation Group team if you would like to. Oh, Haley, did I miss a question from you? If so, please feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, I see a question in the chat. What if you have a school that's mentioned in a highway marker and there's other information about it and it does have an existing church and cemetery? So that would be a similar question to what we were discussing with the schools up in Burke, figuring out, what's still on the landscape and what maybe isn't, and deciding from there whether you might want to pursue a historical highway marker or perhaps Virginia Landmarks Register, National Register listing, both of which could be assisted by this multiple property document that we're so looking forward to having available to us. So please reach out with any additional questions there. And again, I just want to thank you all so much for your time tonight. Continue to be in touch. And I will be reaching out to folks who are on this call to share both the meeting chat as well as a video recording. Those usually take about 24 hours to become available in the system. So look for that tomorrow or early next week. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Marcus and Lena.
Thanks, everyone.